So welcome everyone. My name is Benjamin de Beau. I'm a product manager at InterSystems, working in Jeff Reed's team on the data platform. And today we'll be looking at a product concept that we're working on that is a bit like QuickML that we're announcing this week, and that we hope to be able to get into your hands in the next 12 months or so. So, what is analytic workflows? Analytic workflows is kind of the answer to this problem. So this is a mess, and we're trying to help people address that mess. So anybody who is doing any analytics? Anybody who knows for sure that he's doing the same analytics as the person closest to him that raised his hand? Okay, everybody's doing a little bit of different analytics. So, and it's that diversity, it's that variation that we're trying to go and help address. So let's take a closer look, and we can come back to this one if you want at the end of the presentation, and see how we can. So who would like to have this as his or her daily job? Good, perfect. This is for you. So we'll first talk a little bit about people that are doing analytics, people in the broader data team. So what are the different types of roles in that team, and essentially how do they work together? Then we'll take a look at a particular example on customer churn analysis, and then we'll introduce our solution, Analytic Workflows, for which I have a wonderful demo thanks to our UX team that we can walk through, and that hopefully gives you an idea of what this solution really brings. So, first, meet the data team. So, meet the different actors, the different people that are working together, and let's say in a fictitious environment here. So, this is Eric. Eric is a data engineer, and Eric is a very hands-on person who comes to work in the morning, kind of gets to his desk, and probably first starts by checking whether all of the nightly batches that he was running completed successfully, and then programs a couple more batches and tries to get data from A to B in the format that person Z sitting at B was expecting. So he's working with all kinds of scripting tools, some programming here and there, but really very much hands-on keyboard kind of person. This is sort of where he works. This is kind of a depiction of the workplace where we have the operation. It doesn't. Ooh, the pointer doesn't show on the screen. Anyhow, so he's sitting in the lower right-hand side corner of the work environment, which is where the production machines run, where everything needs to run 24/7, and everything just needs to work. So that's sort of where Eric is. Other parts of the organization are more the experimental lab, where some of the more innovative stuff might be happening. And then, of course, there's the boardroom at the top, where decisions are being made. So this is. Okay, sorry, I got thrown off a little bit. So the second person in our data team is Doug. Doug is a data scientist. So that's one of the crazy wizards. And I can say crazy because I know that one of our own data scientists is sitting in the back. They're the crazy wizards that build the predictive models, that do the advanced machine learning, the wonderful things that Don spoke about in his presentation, and that was also talked to earlier in the keynote sessions this week. So what Doug does is building, so for example, building a fraud model that predicts how likely a new transaction is to be a fraudulent one, so that you can take action if that likelihood is getting too high. He uses a different set of tools. He uses notebook tools like Zeppelin, Jupyter, Nime, using programming languages like Python, R, Scala, Spark. So a lot of very different from Eric, and he's obviously sitting at a different side of our workplace depiction. But they work closely together. I was actually in a conversation with a customer earlier today who was pointing out, to put it gently, a situation where the data scientist kind of ruined the production application by doing this crazy query on it. So that's why Doug and Eric need to be able to work together well. They need to talk to one another in order so that Eric can provide the right data to Doug at a time that's suitable and in a format that prevents Doug from having to reach out into the production systems himself, because after all, he's a little bit crazy. This is Munir. Munir is the data modeler. Munir is the person who sort of safeguards uniformity, consistency in the analytics environment. So what his role is to define business measures and business dimensions in one place, in one uniform way, so that if eventually in the boardroom people are looking at numbers, that there's no two executives that can come with different Excel sheets that give a different interpretation to the numbers that would contradict one another. So being able to define those business measures in one place is sort of his key job and his key concern. So he uses yet a different set of tools. He uses BI tools. He uses SQL and MDX to query those tools. So that's what Meneer does. So Meneer obviously works a lot with Eric to get to the data, and he's sort of sitting somewhere in the middle, making sure that everything looks consistent. Anna is our business analyst. Anna is working with the business models or the business representations of the data provided to her by Meneer, and she's turning that into a story. She's turning that into a presentation, into the charts that people in the boardroom will eventually want to consume. So she works obviously with, there should have been an arrow between Meneer and Doug. I'm sure it will show up. Yeah, there you go. And so they work closely together. She obviously also needs to talk to Doug in order to make sure that Doug tries to predict or tries to identify business relevant patterns in the data set and work with them as a whole. Then there's a couple more people in the environment, like Tom, who's sort of an integration developer who takes models built by Doug and turns them into, embeds them into a production workflow. There's Sophia, who is a SQL expert, a data geek, who really works with, tries to, or is so well versed in SQL that there's no corner of the database that she can't get the data out of. And then essentially somebody needs to be the guy that decides on the budget. So he uses no tools at all. He just looks at paper, and that's what he's good at. So Bob is our manager. So this is the data team. These are all the different actors in an organization. So depending on the size of the organization, these may be effectively different people or different groups of people, but they could also be, some of the roles might be different hats of the same person if you have a smaller organization or a smaller data team as a whole. Okay, so that was the data team. Now let's look at the problem that we're, a problem for the data team. So a task for the data team could, for example, be customer churn analysis. So now what is customer churn analysis? Who is not super familiar with customer churn? Okay, great. So here's an example of customer churn. This is, so I'm Belgian, so I live in Europe. This is a customer of Europe who's kind of churning. He's gonna go away. So this is Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the UK. So customer churn is sort of the ratio of customers that you're losing. So of course you want to keep customer churn as low as possible, but it's hard to get a grasp on what is going into customer churn, especially in the case of Boris Johnson. What are the reasons why they want to leave? But there's some customer-specific features. So, for example, what's the customer profile? What segment does he fit into? What is his recent activity? What sort of subscriptions does he have that he might turn away from us? There's external features. Was there a promotion by a competitor? Is there a certain seasonality? So if you sell Christmas stuff, then you might have your churn rate might be higher in January than it is in December. There's all sorts of factors that go into customer churn. So this is clearly something that Doug needs to roll up his sleeves and try and find this super smart model that kind of helps him address the problem. So let's take a closer look at how our data team is going to approach this problem. So as everything starts with the data, so that's Eric's job. So Eric will try to get the data in place in a safe way so that everybody can kind of get a go at it. So he'll be querying some data from the CRM data set. He'll be joining that to demographics data that, for example, contains average income and other information for a given zip code. So you can join that to the customer information so that you get some more context that is associated with the customer. He also makes an export of the customer service database, so that we know for every customer whether they filed 20 complaints in the past 24 hours or whether they actually just subscribed to 5 more services in the last day. So that's the data that's provisioned by Eric. And how does he do that? Is it Well, it's very dark. So this is how Eric works. I don't know whether it's supposed to be that dark. Anyhow.
Did it come up in a white way?
Yeah, how did that work? Anyway, we'll see. It may get better, and otherwise I'll just have to try and enlighten you in a different way. So Eric has, but to kind of tell you what's on the screen, it's a very ugly script, a database script, so bash script, so very, very hardcore script that you can't possibly, that you really have to be a very hands-on person for. Also note that there's no mouse pointer on this screen. So second person in our group is Munir. So Munir, again, he's the data modeler. He's the guardian of consistency. He's going to build features out of the information that we're getting here. So he's going to, for example, define sort of the, let's say, if you want to say, is this a customer that has sent in complaints, then he's going to say what is the sort of period of time that that we're looking at. If we're going to say, is this a customer that uses our services during the daytime or nighttime? Well, what is day and night? When does night start and when does day begin? So those are all kind of sort of business-like decisions that somebody needs to take, and that's Munir. So he's got an R job, an R script that he built that is taking care of all of the information that's coming from Eric, and that he's going to put into, that essentially is going to result into a flat feature table. So a table that has columns that are ready for Doug to work with. So this is what Munir works with. This is more pleasant to look at. It's not as super crazy dark as the previous screen. So this is R Studio. That's an IDE, a development environment for working with R. So he gets the Excel sheet and the CSV exports that he got from Eric, and he applies some. He uses a couple of R libraries to build that that feature table. The next step is the actual machine learning. So this is where Doug comes in. So this is where Doug is going crazy with his favorite tools. In this case, he's using a couple of Python libraries, and he's using that through a notebook tool called Jupyter. And he builds the predictive model, and he also applies the model to the historical data sets so that they have some information to look at in the boardroom on also on model quality, etc. So this is a screenshot of what his desktop looks like. I probably should have put a kind of the Mac taskbar at the top, but well, I can't really do that myself. So he's using Jupyter. So this is Python code, nicely tucked away in paragraphs that do work with the data, and essentially build a regression model to predict the likelihood, predict the churn rate. Then, once he has that model, once he has that score data set, he hands the score data set to Munir, who can then build a report out of it that's ready for presentation in the boardroom. And he does that through his favorite reporting technology. And Tom is going to embed the model, the predictive model, in an actual live business process. For example, that call center agents, they're going through a workflow. They're putting in information while they're on the phone with the customer, and based on their actions, we might be able to raise an alert and help the agent decide on perhaps offer a particular promotion or recommend a particular thing, so that we could prevent this customer from churning. This is where it's about time to introduce analytic workflows. So what have we looked at? We have looked at an exciting workflow that is a sequence of tasks executed by a variety of people that have the goal of building a particular analytical artifact. In our case, it's a report and it's a model. Now, what are the problems here? The problems here are that many of these steps are achieved through different tools. They're all best-of-breed tools. They're all very popular tools, and they're all the tools that their users like. And their users, not because they're not nice people, but the fact that there's these different people is a second problem. So there's different people that are responsible for these different tasks, and they need to wait for one another to be completed. And then that could be a matter of just walking down to the next desk to say, hey, Doug, I'm ready. You can start your part of the script. It could be email conversations or phone conversations, but there's sort of this informal human part of the workflow that's okay if this is something that you do once a year, but that starts getting a little a little more awkward if you have to do this weekly or daily. So, and then a third problem is, of course, if you need to run this weekly or daily, you're probably going to need to connect this to the production systems. You want to be able to work with the very latest data, so get those CSV exports out of the equation. But that, of course, also adds to the complexity, because then there's even less margin for error. Because if you're talking to the production systems, you might be, upsetting people. So this is where analytic workflows comes in. So this is the problem that we want to solve with our analytic workflows product. Orchestrate workflows like these through a diverse set of tools, and make it work consistently, and make it a monitored process, so that what we were looking at earlier on, that little screenshot of our super duper. So this might have been the screen that that Eric was looking at. That, yeah, it reaches out to the CRM database and it exports some data, and then it runs an R script, and then it does other things in like this awkward bash script. That's probably going to work, but at some point it's going to fall over, and then it's going to be very hard to find out where exactly it went wrong and to recover from it. So this is sort of what we want to help with analytic workflows. Make this a smooth, orchestrated process. So how is this different from other things in the market? So again, the tool interoperability is a key difference. So there are analytic tools out there like Alteryx and Dataiku and Nine that are very, very good tools, very nice to work with, but you have to work with them. You have to, if your data engineer and your data scientist disagree about what is the perfect tool, then it might be impractical to force them to adopt the other's preferred tool. Also, if you're stuck with one particular option, that might be at odds with the fast-paced market in this area. There's constantly new things that are emerging, and if you're using this comprehensive analytics tool, it might not be able to keep up with things. So being able to natively support that diversity is one of the things that we're after with analytic workflows. Also, the automation part. So being able to chain this and make this and making sure that we can plumb the way how data gets transferred from different systems. Because many of the other workflow tools out there, like Luigi, like Airflow, they do a decent job at kind of the process thing, chaining different or kicking off different processes after one finishes, kick off the other one. But they rarely have good infrastructure for exchanging data between those different processes. So that's also something that we're taking care of with analytic workflows. Because frankly, it's maybe a bit of a silly pun on words, but with analytic workflows, you get analytic workflows. Many of the other tools that we've been looking at give you either analytics or workflows, but rarely the two of them. And then finally, repeatability and monitoring of the entire workflow. So all of the different steps are monitored in a consistent way, get the logs into a consistent log store. Whereas if you look at, for example, ETL tools, they typically extract, transform, load. So getting data from one system into target systems. They typically have fair or even very good workflow management and monitoring capabilities, but they only do the ETL part. They don't do the machine learning part or the deploying the model into production part. So this is sort of what we're aiming at with our analytic workflows tool. Now, where are we? Where are we on the journey with analytic workflows? It's actually a very exciting journey, and because we started trialing the concept last year, went to a couple of conferences, talked to a number of customers, and does this make sense? Would this help you? And then in the beginning of the year, we started brainstorming. We started doing some design workshops in which we try to identify the people within InterSystems that are the closest to Eric and Doug, our two primary targets for this. And then with our wonderful UX team, who's sitting almost completely there, we've been going through it. Hello. we've been working through different iterations of the design. So this is, whereas in the past, InterSystems has always, or at least talking about the data platforms group that I'm part of, we've always produced technology, and technology that helps developers build better applications. This is a project where we're really targeting more of an end user type of persona. Okay, it could be Eric who prefers to work with the keyboard, but we still need to be very user focused in order to deliver a solution for this problem. We're not just defining a new index type and making a performance optimization under the hood. So the usability testing and design iterations were really instrumental in getting to where we are, and what I'll be showing you very shortly. And then also this quarter we'll be starting the actual product development. And here are a couple of screenshots of how the design process looked like. So this is what we drew up in January. So actually the red are transitions. It's not that it was wrong. No, it's always right if you're in this stage of the process. Then we started to kind of simplify the design a little bit, and gradually kind of make it more tangible and make it more concrete. Then we started building these very initial crude mock-ups. And gradually we started to perfect the way how they looked and doing more high fidelity interfaces of the design. And we're really designing from the user experience, designing from the functionality that the end user is expecting down to the base model. And this is kind of the last stage before the version that I'll be presenting to you shortly. And there was a lot of fun in there, a lot of whiteboard sessions with multicolored Post-its. We're still looking for Post-its in our corporate color scheme, but we'll get there one day. So with that, it's time to kind of hide behind the table and try and give you a bit of an idea of what our tool looks like. So anybody in the audience who has this sort of analytic workflows running at his place, or where? Oh, there we go. So, okay, I've logged in. I'm Eric, and I'm opening analytic workflows at the start of my day, and I want to start building my or probably more midday. I'm going to build a new workflow. So I arrive in this in the design interface where I can start adding tasks. So remember, I was going to load the demographics files that I was gonna join to the CRM database. So here, this is how we start adding tasks and how we're gonna build up our workflow. But you've seen that it was a workflow with 7-8 steps. So I'm not gonna do this right here. So I go back to my dashboard and I will just open the design of an existing workflow. So this is the full one that loads our demographics file, that loads from a database, that joins the database to our demographics file, that then also loads from customer service database, and so on and so on. And also here, so this is where we can just copy and paste the R code that we got from Munir straight into our environment. And we don't have to worry about the plumbing of getting the data from a CSV file into something else. We can just really say that, okay, we've got a data set that we call customer profiles, and it's going to be incarnated, it's going to be instantiated in my R environment in the local variable called profiles. So I've asked Munir to comment out his line because Analytic Workflows is going to do the plumbing for you. It's going to provision that data in that format. And also at the back end, afterwards, to get the training data out, we're just going to define a new data set that maps to our local variable training data. And so you can also consult these inputs and outputs here, just as a quick overview of all of the various pieces and models and files that are generated in this overview. I can, besides the raw tabular overview, to get more of a sense of how the tasks are sequenced, are combined. I can also go to the graph view, and here I see it laid out nicely, and I can see through the different steps, also showing very, very nicely how the different outputs are being passed from one piece to another. And again, I don't have to worry about whether these are totally different technologies. That's really what our solution will take care of. Okay, so imagine I'm in my design view, and I wanna test things. So obviously I wanna get this going. So there's this run button. There's a menu that does even more, offer even more options. But I'm gonna run my test, and like any good demo, it fails. So I can scroll to the step where the error originated, so I don't have to kind of mug around in all kinds of awkward log files from those different tools. It's all parsed for me, and apparently I made a silly mistake in my query, so I can fix that, and then just run the workflow from that point on. And then in almost instantaneously, it's complete, and we have all of the information that we wanted. And this is also a moment when we can just when we can sit back and take a closer look at, for example, the data that was actually loaded to get a quick insight of this. Again, I'm still in the design mode, so I want all of these outputs to be preserved so I can check whether everything is fine. I can also do that from our nicely laid out graph view, so I can check whether this data makes actual sense and is really what we were looking for. So that's sort of the process that Doug and Eric are going to go through to kind of organize their workflows from one central place. So this was the design piece. Of course, I've promised that another important part of the work is obviously being able to monitor whether these things run and run consistently. And this is where we go back to our dashboard, and we can see that the different how our different workflows are executing on their schedule. So this one's running, but apparently there were a couple of runs that had failures. So let's take a look at these past runs. So here I'm looking at just the executions of my customer churn analysis workflow, and I can see that there was one here that had an error in it. So I can jump to it and look at this sort of read-only version of my design view, and then see that there was a warning. But this is I'm Doug, so this is the time when I really want to see the raw logs. So I'm going to go to the log view, and here I can see the logs that are coming from these various tasks, from these various tools, and I can find out what's happening. But you'll see that because we're kind of running this in the most efficient way possible when it's a production run, that some of these tasks are interleaved, so that's not super practical to look at. So I'm going to group this by tasks so that I can see, okay, task 1 was all good, task 2 was good, 3, yeah, a couple warnings, oh, there's something empty here, and then essentially it's breaking down because the data was empty. But now, without having to know too much about the various technologies, I can quickly single out where my problem is, and I can finally pick up the phone and kind of get in touch with Munir and kindly point out that there might be something wrong in his piece, or at least we can. This is how we can debug. But I haven't seen exactly what the output was for these different steps, because when I'm in a production mode, I don't want to keep all the intermediate results around. I just want things to run smoothly and efficiently. So what I can do in this case is go to my schedule. So it's running at a specific time. You can also run it at on the recurrent schedule, and then here I can kind of highlight which data sets or models I want to track so that they are persisted after my workflow finishes, so that I can go and consult that in addition to the log files. So that's this is the interface. This is really what we're going to implement. This is sort of how we want to approach that problem that Doug and Eric and the others in his team are facing. So. Related work, so we're not developing this in pure isolation. There's a couple of other projects that have touch points with this. Some of you may already have seen sessions presented by Edward Lebedyuk and Sergei Lukyanchikov, two colleagues from the Russian office who have authored a machine learning toolkit. What is the problem that the machine learning toolkit addresses? So mathematical modeling tools like R and Python are very powerful for doing the mathematical modeling, but they're not always as easy to kind of orchestrate or run from processes or tie into data that comes from your data set. So what they've done is they developed a toolkit that allows sort of bidirectional access between those modeling environments and IRIS, so that you can, from your object script code, you can invoke Python code directly, or at a higher level of abstraction from your IRIS business processes, from InterSystems IRIS interoperability, you can call Python code. So this is an example screenshot of how that looks. So you can have activities in your workflow that really represent small snippets of Python or R code, and that help you get going. So there was a session at 1:30, but there's also another one tomorrow, I think at 11, where Sergey and Edward are going to present together with a customer, Inland Imaging, who is already using this because it's available on the InterSystems Open Exchange, and where you can see it in action. So how is this different from what we were looking at with analytic workflows? Here, this is really for just Doug, for our data scientist, for the person that writes Python or R code, and allowing them to have a little bit of a process feeling to it and being able to invoke and drive it efficiently from IRIS. What analytic workflows does is it offers a higher level of abstraction. We're really abstracting this whole process as a whole, the whole machine learning piece. We're abstracting the whole thing as individual tasks in a higher level workflow. So this is a lower level of granularity and a focus exclusively on the data scientists themselves. Another related project that you've heard being announced yesterday by Scott and being demoed by Alex this morning. You'll see another demo of, let's say, the actual SQL tomorrow in Jeff Fried's show and tell session. But the idea of QuickML is to help our data geek who has superb SQL skills, superb mastery of the SQL language, but not necessarily as much knowledge about machine learning and no time at all to go learn Python and go learn all of these wonderful libraries. So what we're offering with QuickML is sort of a turnkey tool for SQL developers to start building models straight on top of their table data. The idea there is that we can, in the background, do what is currently known as AutoML, automated machine learning, which means that we're going to do some automated feature engineering. We're automatically going to test a variety of models and present you with the model that is best performing for the problem that you presented to it. What is it going to look like? So for example, for a fraud risk model, it's really as simple as create model, refer to which column you're predicting, and refer to the table that you're predicting from. You train your model based on a SQL query that selects from existing tables, and predicting from the model is really also just a simple SQL function. Again, you'll see this tomorrow in action. So this is also a concept that's a little farther along than analytic workflows, and something that we hope to get into your hands in the 2020.1 release. So that's an overview of what we were after with analytic workflows. If you feel like you're an Eric or a Doug or a Munir or anybody else who is faced with this problem and who would like to have a better solution, we're still actively looking for people who want to validate this design and who want to help us make sure that it really meets the problems and really answers the problems that you have. And we already have recruited a couple of volunteers and tested with them previously, but there's definitely room for more. So please reach out after this session, and we'll be happy to take your name and email address and start bugging you with screenshots and interactive sessions and phone calls. But it's really a fun and very rewarding process. Just to wrap up, a quick overview of past sessions and upcoming sessions. Why did you include all of those past sessions? Because they're in the past? Well, because they will be published in the future. So we're recording every session. So shortly at the learning.intersystems.com, you'll be able to watch recordings of all of our sessions around analytics and data management. Maybe tomorrow. So I also wanted to highlight the fact that we really have a nice number of partners that are co-presenting in this area. And for the ML toolkit that I mentioned earlier on, so there's the experience lab that Edward is presenting, and then Sergey's session on the machine learning toolkit, like a regular breakout session that you can attend. And for those interested, there's also the symposium with a lot more external speakers starting tomorrow at 1:30. Okay, thanks all for coming, and hope to see you soon.